What is up, guys? In today's video, we're going to be watching a video from Tricky about the mini seasons in Fortnite and whether or not they are good or bad for the state of the game. We are currently on our 4th mini season with Chapter 1 OG, Chapter 2 Remix, the Star Wars season, and then this one. And I think, obviously the first two were incredibly successful. The Star Wars one got a lot of hate, and then I feel like the Simpsons one, I don't know if it's been successful or not. I saw Fortnite post that this was the most amount of returning players they've had since the last holiday season, and I think a lot of people look at that as just like a definitive W that's huge, but I don't even think that really has to do with mini seasons, and more so just to do with the map change. It just so happens that the mini seasons have been a map change for 3 of the 4, but I think the most exciting time to be a Fortnite player, the most hyped time to be a Fortnite player, and the time where most people are going to be motivated to start playing again or reinstall again is going to be when we get a new map, whether that's a mini season map like we had with this one or the chapter 7 map coming in 2 weeks. I think those times are always going to be the most hyped. So I feel like there's kind of somewhat fake data with the mini seasons. I think chapter 1 and 2 were obviously huge, and I could see a world in which those brought a lot of people back to the game, but the Simpsons one, I don't think the hype is there as much just because it's a Simpsons mini season, but more so just that people were burnt out with Chapter 6 and burnt out with the Chapter 6 map. But his channel will be linked in the description below if you guys want to check it out. And let's get into it.
I had this question in the back of my mind ever since the launch of Chapter 6 and the fall of players after the remix season. It's safe to say that every November for the past 2 years has been the best months out of Fortnite's year.
I agree. But as I said, I think that's mainly just due to the map change and to do with how much hype there was for Chapter 1 returning and for Chapter 2 returning. The Simpsons season has been good as far as player count goes, I guess, but it's not the same amount of hype and excitement within the community, at least from what I see. The Chapter 1 OG season was one of the most special times in the Fortnite community.
Here. And that's for an obvious and good reason. The maps that they bring back are only in the game for a month, and just recently we received a brand new map for the Simpsons season. However, the recent release of the Simpsons season wasn't as big of a boom as Chapter 2 Remix or Season OG. Obviously, the Simpsons season map isn't a nostalgic map within Fortnite, so that may lead to a decrease in interest.
100%.
However, since last year and the fall of Fortnite's player count after every single mini season, this brings up the true question: will mini seasons fail Fortnite in the long run? Let's dive deep into the player count, interest in each seasons, and predict just how good or bad the Simpsons season will affect Chapter 7. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Yo, what is going on, guys? If you're new here, my name is Tricky. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure to sub to the channel and to use code TRICKYS, TRICKYS.
This man about to play the game?
Fortnite item shop. So let's get to one of the biggest questions first, and one of the most notable. Does player count even matter within Fortnite?
Yes and no. Obviously, player count matters. The lower it goes, the worse it's going to be. But I don't think Fortnite is ever at a point where the game is just going to stop getting development. Even in the Star Wars season or towards the end of Chapter 6, where people were losing a lot of interest and the player count wasn't the greatest, Fortnite was still one of the most popular games on Earth. By far. And the player count that Fortnite has on a bad day is something that would be celebrated in almost any other gaming community, aside from Roblox, I guess. But people have this perception that it always needs to be growing, or it always needs to be the most popular game, or it's bad. But I just don't think that is sustainable. And I also think that throughout the course of a chapter, player interest will just naturally go down. And that's why I was saying that the map switch is the time that's most exciting. When a new chapter drops, it's hype and exciting. We get a new map, we get a new loot pool, we usually get new mechanics. And then over the course of the year, people kind of lose interest in things until, we get another revamp or we get another mini season.
Well, yes and no. Obviously, the player count needs to be higher so that Epic Games makes more sales. However, I think that retention is the best thing within Fortnite. Yes, the Chapter 2 Remix season was crazy. They had 14 million players during the...
That's also true. So he's saying that keeping the players is more important than just constant growth. But this number is fake. This 14 million players for the live event, obviously that's real and it happened. I don't think they botted it. But a lot of the people tuning in for the live event might not necessarily be that interested in playing the game. There's correlation there, but it's also like when there's an event and when there's something like big and special happening and everybody is motivated to get on and play at that exact moment because of the event, numbers are obviously going to be inflated. On a random Tuesday, not everybody needs to be motivated to get on at that exact same time. You know what I mean? You might have 14 million players that get on over the course of the day and play, but not everybody needs to be on at the exact same moment, like what happens with the events. And so the event player count is always like ridiculously inflated. And then that makes it, people look at the chart and think the game is dying because you see a huge spike there and then it goes down. But like, obviously it would go down after an event.
Live event, and that was basically because there was a ton of artists, including Juice World, that were in the concert. However, Fortnite didn't retain a ton of those players into Chapter 6. Actually, from October 2024 till October 2025, they technically lost double their player count. Fortnite was sitting at roughly a good 3 million players.
This is active online players. I think he's saying this is the start of the chapter, or was he, or hold on.
And at the end of Chapter 6, they were sitting roughly at 1.5 million, and some days they were not even hitting a million players. So the biggest thing for the 5, they technically lost double their player count. Fortnite was sitting at roughly...
I don't know if this number is from October or the start of Chapter 6. But either way, as I said, like most people are going to be motivated to play at the start of the chapter, and that's when they're going to be motivated to play the most. Over the course of the chapter, the active player count might go down, but it's just like a lot of people are still playing the game. They're just not playing for as long, probably.
A good 3 million players, and at the end of Chapter 6, they were sitting roughly at 1.5 million, and some days they were not even hitting a million players. So the biggest thing for the Simpsons season is if they can keep the retention of the players that they've already brought back and lead them into Chapter 7, that would be more successful than having a month-long season where you have a ton of players, but they leave whenever Chapter 7 hits. That's just not good for the long term of Fortnite. And staying on topic of the retention, some may feel like that mini-season content is just consumed way too quickly. And there was really no reason to stay, for me at least, throughout Chapter 6 because I didn't personally like the map. The good thing is that Epic started to diversify and also brought back Fortnite OG as a permanent mode, so if you didn't like the Chapter 6 mode, you didn't have to stay on it. But again, a lot of people don't want to play Fortnite OG because, number one, they might have already played it and there's nothing really to look forward to in the storyline, and also they might just want something new. Yes, the biggest reason why I didn't play Chapter 6 and why a lot of people may not have as well is we went from crazy content in Chapter 2 Remix, and then when we transitioned on to Chapter 6, it felt really stale. The Winterfest was really good, I'll give them that. However, the map didn't seem to have a ton of changes, and also there was just something about it with the layout that I
don't know what he's saying. I guess he's saying throughout the course of Chapter 6 Season 1, there wasn't very many map changes? Because if you look like totally throughout Chapter 6, there's a lot of changes season to season.
I personally didn't enjoy and didn't want to grind. Also, the biggest thing with mini seasons is that a lot of things are really strong in the game mode. However, they lack a lot in other aspects. Like one instance is the map is really good. However, the loot pool semi lacks. Yes, we do have a lot of Simpsons themed guns in the Fortnite Simpsons season. However, the loot pool is just not the greatest. The map is great. The mechanics are great. I love the entirety of the Fortnite Simpsons season. However, just name a few guns, the Thunder Shotgun and the Striker AR, those are really the only two weapons you will use. The infantry rifle is pretty good as well, but it felt like with the main loot pool, they kind of just threw weapons together instead of really testing out the loot.
I agree with that. Like, I don't agree with what he said about like those only weapons being good, but like it is just feel kind of random, but it's like, I don't know, it's whatever to me.
Pull first. But this is one thing about not only Fortnite as a whole, but the entirety of gaming, is that everything is becoming shorter and shorter. If you notice, Fortnite has gone into faster gameplay. First, you know, we had Fortnite Battle Royale.
Okay, I actually have like a very thought out opinion on this somewhat.
And then they transitioned into Fortnite
He's gonna blame TikTok.
And then we started to get the introduction of mini seasons every single November, and now we also have Blitz. It's becoming shorter and shorter content, and that really does destroy the retention of a ton of people. And if you don't keep constantly pushing out content, it is going to get stale. And I would love to do a video on this, but yes, in my opinion, I feel like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, a lot of short form content is decreasing people's attention spans. And that might be one of the reasons why a lot of people don't want to sit through a 30-minute battle royale game.
Okay, so BR games are not 30 minutes, but also I think a large part and why people would play in early Chapter 1 despite the pacing feeling much slower is because the game was new to everybody, so everything was a lot more memorable. Fortnite has been out for 8 years at this point. People have been playing for 8 years. Getting a simple win doesn't feel as exciting. It's not as much of a motivating factor. You're probably not willing to like do everything you can to win in the same way that you might have in 2017 because you've been playing the game for years. And even if you started playing in like chapter 3, that was 3 years ago. I think this happens with every game and every genre of game. And this is part of why Fortnite blew up, I think, or like BRs blew up, is because it was a new, fresh genre that like everybody was new to at the same time. And so every little thing felt exciting. Every kill you got felt exciting. Every win you got felt exciting. Just simply getting a gold weapon, people were like screenshotting that and posting it online. Like, holy crap, I got a gold scar. Nowadays, you've been playing for years, just getting that gold weapon doesn't hit the same. Getting a win doesn't hit the same. And I don't think there's anything that Fortnite can really do about that. Like, that's just like natural. And one of the few things they can do is increase the pace of the game. If people aren't willing to like deal with like as slow gameplay because they've been playing for years and they've gotten used to faster gameplay, then all they can really do is advance that. And Blitz is like an extreme example of that, but Blitz was also made for mobile, so I feel like it's not like necessarily the same. But Reload is faster paced and much more like packed with action. And I think a lot of the reason why that appeals to a lot of people is because the regular gameplay doesn't hit the same after playing for as many years. Like, I don't think it's just strictly like TikTok and YouTube shorts, like how people make it out to be.
And instead go and play Reload. I like the idea that they didn't go back to chapter 3. I think number 1, it was way too soon, but number 2, chapter 3 really isn't that nostalgic for a lot of people. Yes, you might sit here and say, well, chapter 3 is nostalgic for me. Well, chapter 5 wasn't as big as chapter 2 nor chapter 1, so it will not bring back as many players like The Simpsons did. The biggest
I agree that chapter 3 wasn't as big of a deal as chapter 1 or 2, and it hasn't been as long. When we got chapter 1 OG back, it was end of 2023. It had been like 4 years since we had been on that map. And then chapter 2 was 2021 to 2024, so it was about 3 years. The last time we were on the chapter 3 map was only 3 years ago as well. So I got like I agree that it's maybe too soon for chapter 3. And that chapter 3 wouldn't bring as much of a resurgence to the game as chapter 1 or chapter 2 did. But I think that chapter 3 OG would maybe get more Fortnite players interested in playing Fortnite again than just like the Simpsons team. Like, I could be very wrong and ignorant about this, but I haven't seen like a huge influx of new players trying the game strictly because of the Simpsons season. And with chapter 1 and chapter 2 remakes, I saw a lot of people that like previously played Fortnite getting back into the game.
thing that Epic
But maybe that's just like my own, circle of people.
Games needs to focus on is creating really good content for chapter 7, because it feels like Epic Games is relying on nostalgia at this moment. And many may say, well, The Simpsons isn't nostalgic. It is for a lot of people that used to watch the show whenever they were growing up. A lot of people that are maybe 25, 30, maybe even a little bit older that are just coming back to Fortnite again because of The Simpsons probably watched it when they were kids. And using nostalgia will work in the short term, but there is not going to be a long-term reason to stay if they don't do something big for chapter 7. And if you don't know, chapter 7 is looking really promising, and they need to make chapter 7 better than the Simpsons season, because if they do, a lot of people will stay. If you don't know, they are doing like a Hollywood theme.
I think regardless of what they do, people will stay and they will play the launch of chapter 7, and then throughout the course of it, people will lose interest until we get a new map in chapter 8 or the mini season at the end of chapter 7. Chapter 7 could be the greatest thing of all time, and I don't think it's going to hook and maintain people in the same way because people have been playing Fortnite for 8 years. Everything felt special. Everything felt like memorable in chapter 1 because we were all new to it.
Also a Nevada theme with Area 51, a casino POI, which I cannot wait for. But it's smart. Epic Games is trying to keep their Battle Royale audience the same as it was by tending more to their older players, because come on, a casino POI? I think anyone that is older than 17, 18 thinks that is a really cool addition. One of the most important things that I want to go over, though, is the hype cycle. It is so much shorter.
And I think that is everything I've just been laying out and talking about. the game has been out for longer, it's harder to maintain player interest for as long.
Players will really stop caring about Battle Royale, and they will want constant content no matter what whenever Chapter 7 comes out, especially if it's not good. So after looking at the player count graph as well, I have noticed something that is perpetual every single year since we have gotten mini seasons. Obviously, we have a huge spike every single mini season, and
this is also just yearly chapters. Or just any chapter. Like, my opinion is that, like, when a map comes out, it will be hype and interesting. Over time, players will lose interest in that map, and that is why Fortnite went to yearly chapters. Rather than having 2 years on a map and that decline just constantly happening, a new map is a way to, like, regain players. And I think that's more about map changes than it is about a mini-season, but the mini-season's also, like, obviously with Chapter 2 brought a lot of people back in. Chapter 1 and 2 brought a lot of people back in. But these spikes, as I was talking about, are kind of fake. Because it's the event. And so when you're comparing it to the event, it looks like the game dies after the mini season and the mini season was carrying. But like, I think a large part of it is just that like the event is inflated, so it makes everything look drastic. This is launch of Chapter 7. It obviously went down within like a month. But for that first month, it was like pretty comparable. And as I said, I just think that's normal. And then these spikes are new season launches. Each of these spikes is a season launch, and like the same exact thing happens. New people come back to the game, they try the game again. Everybody's playing at the same time because it's a new season. And then once the newness of the new season wears off, it's not as like urgent for people to play. I wish we had numbers on people logging into the game. Like how many people played daily. Because these active player counts are just people that are playing right at that exact moment. Or the 24-hour peak is the maximum amount of players playing in that 24-hour period. But we don't know how many people actually got on the game and played. And I feel like that would be a lot more relevant of a number. Looking at active players now will always skew towards like events being super high and like new content releases being very high. And just the regular day-to-day being lower because people aren't as motivated to get on if there's not something new and urgent to like get on and try. But that doesn't mean they aren't playing.
And then slowly and
they might just play like 30 minutes to an hour rather than like 3 to 4 hours.
Gradually, the player count drops. Season OG, we had the highest concurrent players out of the entire month. And then after, it was holding around 4 to 5 million players. Then slowly dropped all the way down to 2 million. Then it spiked again in November once we got the release of Chapter 2 Remix. And then it slowly started to go back down from 3 million players down to...
Yeah, like I said, I think it's just natural. This is what will happen, especially with a yearly release game. But if you look at any game release, this is exactly how the chart looks. Upon release, everything is high, and then over time it goes down. Fortnite chapter releases are like the yearly COD release or the release of a new game. The hype is going to be most at the start. And then the seasons and stuff is a way to like get people back into the game and like maintain interest. But it's mostly just like keeping things afloat until the next big chapter can like bring in a lot of people again.
Around
and restart that hype cycle.
1.5 million in October. So I think the answer for mini seasons failing are no, they are not failing Fortnite. The biggest thing that is failing Fortnite are the chapters before or after the mini season. If the chapters aren't good, then why would people even play the mini season after if they didn't enjoy the chapter before? And obviously Chapter 6 was probably the least enjoyed chapter out of them all, except for Chapter 4, because the player count doesn't lie. It is proven that the interest is so much less for...
I think that has to do with people playing the game for as many years as I was saying. And I think Chapter 7's dip will be even lower than Chapter 6's, even if it's the greatest chapter of all time. Like, this is nothing about a prediction of the gameplay. I just think it's natural that people aren't hooked in the same way because they've been playing the game for years and years.
Chapter 6 than any other chapter in...
I think Chapter 6 was actually really good. And, like, somewhat consistently good throughout. Like, the end was a bit of a struggle, but I think the end of any chapter will be a struggle. Even the Star Wars season, I didn't dislike as much as most people. And he hasn't talked about the Star Wars season, which I think is interesting.
A while. So
Maybe
my closing thoughts are Epic Games needs to make sure that Chapter 7 is filled with content and that they market it in a way that brings a ton of more players back even after the Simpsons season, so that whatever they do for the mini season in November, whether it's another remix style season, a throwback of nostalgia, more people will come back. Anyways, guys, let me know if I missed anything down in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts as well. Do you think mini seasons are failing Fortnite? I would love to hear.
Okay, so he didn't talk about Star Wars season at all, which I think is interesting because it's the odd one out. It was the one that occurred in the middle of a chapter. And I think that was Epic trying to see if they can kind of stem that bleeding a bit, because as we talked about, mini seasons are something that's hype and interesting and exciting. There's a lot of FOMO because people need to play for that 1 month. So you encourage a lot of people to play all at once. Usually they happen at the end of chapters. The Star Wars one happened in the middle, and I think that was Epic trying to see, like, can we reinvigorate a chapter in the middle of it? And the Star Wars season got a lot of hate, and I think was an all-time low for the player count before, you know, Chapter 6, Season 4 happened. I could be wrong on that. But the Star Wars player count, I know, was lower than what people expected, and it did get a lot of hate. And it didn't reinvigorate the game in the same way that, like, some of these other mini-seasons could be. And my personal opinion for why that is not even necessarily the content of the Star Wars season, but just that it was taking place on the Chapter 6 map. And that's why I was saying a lot of this has to do with map changes, because the Star Wars season was on the Chapter 6 map. They just had 4 Star Wars POIs in the corner. And so it didn't feel as special. It didn't feel as hype. Even though we had an entire Star Wars loot pool, which I personally think the Star Wars loot pool is pretty solid. The spaceships were annoying. I didn't like that. If I could change anything, it would have been that. But I think the Star Wars season was pretty solid. It just didn't give people a break from the Chapter 6 map in the same way that these mini seasons, like Chapter 1 OG, Chapter 2 Remix, and then now the Simpsons one, gave people their own map to play on. And that's one thing I would be interested to see, because I don't think that Chapter 7 is going to go away from this model. I think we're going to have, you know, Chapter 7 seasons 1 and 2, and then a Chapter 7 mini season, and then, you know, the final seasons, and then a mini season, and then Chapter 8. I would be interested to see if the Chapter 7 mini season, or what I would like them to do, is the mini season that occurs in the middle of the chapter, give it its own map, like how the Simpsons one had. If we took a break from the chapter map for that 1 month and then went back to it, I think that would help, like, alleviate some of that player burnout in a way that, like, the Star Wars season didn't, because we never actually, like, took a break from the Chapter 6 map. But yeah, I don't think mini seasons are going anywhere, especially with them, like, being collabs. Like, y'all know how much Epic loves collabs. I feel like the first Chapter 1 OG mini season was, like, proof of concept that mini seasons can work. And then they took that information and kind of sold it to collabs. Like, Chapter 2 Remix was Chapter 2, but it was, like, obviously it had the rappers and, like, all those collabs. Star Wars mini season, just a collab. Simpsons mini season, just a collab. And I think that's kind of what we're going to get going forward, is that it's going to be a way for them to, like, hype up a big collab and have it be something kind of crazy and special, but not, like, impact the Fortnite gameplay for as, like, many months, because it's just, like, a month-long throwaway thing. So yeah, I don't think we'll get any collab full-length seasons like how we had with the first 2 Marvel ones, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if we had, like, a Marvel mini season at some point, or whatever collab that Epic wants to do, I think is going to be a mini season, and that's why I don't think it's going anywhere. Even recently, we're getting Stranger Things in Blitz mode. Like, Stranger Things is, like, taking over Blitz. Blitz is another way they're selling collabs. And Fortnite doesn't care about anything more than collabs. They're obsessed with them. So I don't think the mini seasons are going anywhere. I think they're relatively good for the game, but, like, the main change I would like to see is, like, that mid-chapter mini season having its own map and giving the entire community a break from the main chapter map in the middle, and just seeing, like, how people would react to that and how that would affect, like, player burnout throughout the course of the chapter. But that is going to be it for this video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. His channel will be linked down in the description below if you want to check it out. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.